Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about polearm units. So that includes your fortebraccios, your imp pikes, and then also your halberdiers as well. So the difference between pikes and halberdiers, although they are both technically polearms, is the pikes are really good against cavalry, and so are the halberdiers as well. But the halberdiers have built-in block break against shielded units. And we can see that in their veterancy on here somewhere. As soon as I find it. There we go, shield breakers. So most halberdiers will have this shield breaker trait, which means they do really well against armored units, and they also have built-in block break. So let's go ahead and start with the halberdiers and some of their gameplay. So as of right now, there's only 3 halberdier units in the game, and those are your Landsknechts, your normal halberdiers, and then halb sergeants. Unfortunately, I can't bring the normal halberdiers and the Landsknechts in this, so we're just going to talk about one or the other. Or I'll bring one or the other and we'll talk about them both. So let's go ahead and start with the Landsknechts. Now, again, another important thing to keep in mind is the honor upgrades that apply to the halberdiers also apply to this seasonal promotion as well. And you can put a skin on them, so I put a skin on mine to make them look a little bit more like a Western halberdier unit, although that's not really important. So the way you really want to play this unit is sort of a burst damage unit. So you brace them, and you charge them in. And that'll kill most heroes and do a lot of damage to troops. After that's done, you go ahead and hit the 3 button, and that'll give them bonus bleed damage on their attacks. And then once their 3 ability is down and you no longer see it activating, I would go ahead and pull the troops out. This is not a unit designed for sustained combat. It's what I would consider one of the more burst damage pikes. So you see the same playstyle with Prefecture Pikemen. You charge them in, let them get that daze and their 3 battle attack off, and then you go ahead and pull them out and wait till their charge is up again. Now, if you're just V'ing them, you can also use their 3 attack, and like you see here, it does a lot of damage. They're a really good troop and hero killers. The only downside is they are very squishy. An important mechanic to keep in mind too is the direction they're braced doesn't really matter. You can charge them just like that, although the front ones didn't get a very good charge off because the units were right on them. But it doesn't matter which direction they're braced. So unlike a lot of other pikes and polearm units, their brace does a little bit, like we'll see here, but it's not really what you want to try and be using. It's not bad if you're really stuck in a bad position and you can't retreat your unit or you can't pull them out, but you're mainly going to be using this unit as a burst damage. I mean, it wiped the domains there because they're very squishy. And I would always recommend trying using the box formation. The wedge isn't bad, but I feel like on the box you get a little bit more condensed damage. And you can use the F1 formation if you're trying to cover a lot of space. Alright, so let's talk about halb sergeants here. So halb sergeants have the exact same playstyle as normal halberdiers, unlike the Landsknechts. The only difference is these guys do a little bit more damage, obviously, and they're tankier. So these, again, do decent amount of damage if you're just V'ing them in, but I would always try and make sure that these units are in a brace. That's really where you're going to see them shine. So there's 2 brace formations here that you're mainly going to be using. The circle isn't bad if you're getting attacked from all angles, but I rarely ever use it. So this is the phalanx formation, and it's really good against cavalry and infantry troops. The downside is that you can't immediately brace with it. unlike your F1 formation. So here. There we go. Let's just V them up. I would always recommend if there's just a few units left too, if it's a defensive unit, just press V, wipe them up quickly, because otherwise it's going to take forever to kill. So a good way to initiate with these guys is charge them in, make sure they're in the F1 formation. You see the brace, or you see the charge damage, and then you immediately brace them after that, and you'll get a very condensed formation here that'll do a lot of damage once they slap up. I didn't do it very well, but as you can see, if you time it perfectly, you'll get a lot of them in a line here, and they'll all stab and delete the enemy. Halb Sergeants do a lot of damage. But again, you can only do this if you're in the F1 formation. If you try to charge and then brace while you're in the phalanx formation, it'll bug out and they'll try to go into the phalanx. So they'll walk around a little bit and they won't immediately brace. So you don't really want to charge in the F2 formation. Another thing to keep in mind, the cool thing about halberdiers in general is when they're in that phalanx formation, they turn pretty effectively. So here. So it's very hard to flank these guys because even though they'll get attacked from the side and the back, they'll turn to attack them while getting the braced defense bonus, as you see here. So again, it's very hard to flank them. And these are a fun unit. They're not really that meta just because they're not as powerful as some of the other polearm troops that we see, like the Imperials or the Fortebraccios, or even the Medaus now since we're in Season 8. So they really get outshined by that. I still think it's a fun unit. I would definitely use it in sieges. And if you want a fun unit in sieges to make some money and they'll perform really well, the Landsknechts also do a fantastic job. So let's talk about veterancies real quick. So for the Halb Sergeants, I recommend going bottom line because, again, you're really trying to play around that brace. It's really good, and it's bottom line as well with normal halberdiers. And we'll look at Landsharks. Landsharks, I can never say that right. Top line with Landsharks because the number of enemies you can hit, that's usually what you want to go for on a unit if that's in the unit veterancy tree. So let's go ahead and talk about normal pikes as well. So we'll go ahead and bring the Medaus. Where are my Fortebraccios? We'll talk about these guys. And then let's get the Pike Militia. So you can use the Pike Militia or the Rattan Pikemen if you want a good brawler in sieges. I would recommend using them because they're a fantastic unit for 100 leadership. I have the charge doctrine on mine as well, so I can actually charge in and brace the same playstyle I was using with my Landsharks. It's a little latency there, but that's fine. Couldn't brace immediately. So the brace is really powerful on these guys because they have a chance to stun in their veterancy, and they also get a bunch of bonus damage and pen with it as well. So I would just play through, make sure they're braced. They're a great unit for 100 leadership. Rattan Pikemen don't have any special abilities whatsoever or any formations. They're just the F1, and that's it. So they are just a brawl unit. So try to flank behind, use that formation to get around the units like I'm doing here with your Rattan Pikemen, and just press V to get the criticals. But again, since they're Rattans, they have high slashing and piercing defense. They are weak to fire, though, is something to keep in mind, but you really don't run into a whole lot of fire units in this game unless it's the Flame Flowers, the Sifanari. And in any case, you're going to die to that no matter what unit you have, really, so it doesn't matter then. I would recommend going middle line for the Pike Militia to get the brace on stun and the extra bonuses. And let's talk about Fortebraccios now. So the placement of these units is they're not going to be the first ones in combat. With any Pike in general, you should always try and place them behind shield units or behind shock troops in a brawl, death ball, brawl, whatever you like to call it, in the giant fights. So they're mainly going to be behind those first liners, and you can either V them or brace them in, whatever you want to do. The Fortebraccios, you're really trying to play around the brace here. So these are really good against infantry and cavalry. They are the quintessential Pike that you're going to see in T-Wars in a defense because they're so powerful. You can get the bracing stuns doctrine on them, and we can see that here. It'll stun the units. They do very high damage. The only downside to them is you have to keep in mind that only the tips of these pikes will do damage when in the braced, and you have to watch your flanks and your behind on these units. Don't be afraid to V the Fortebraccios because they do high damage in combat and they'll wipe a lot. So here we can see some of that here. I'm not even going to brace. Just going to send them in and press V. And as you can see, they're wiping. These are domain shields, so they're not very tanky. They're not a very good unit, but you'll see them do high damage, and they are really scary. So you mainly want to place these guys around a wall or around a gate and have a shield unit on top for a defensive formation. Again, if a hero tries to come up and disrupt, because you're going to see that a lot with the mauls trying to get on the side and disrupt them, the short swords coming in with the ult, unless there's a lot of enemy troops you're trying to stop, I would just go ahead and press V, and they'll all attack that hero, and he should be dead. I don't really use the line formation a whole lot. It's not bad if you're trying to cover a larger area, but for the most part, if you're in a field against cavalry and there's a lot of them, you can use the loose formation, which is pretty good against cavalry. Or if you're down a small alleyway, I would really try to use the condensed box formation and just watch your backside. The Imperial Pikes, oh, well, for the Veterancy, I can't remember which line, but the last node on the line you want to go is they can hit an extra unit. I believe it's top line, but I would just double check. Look for the one that hits an extra unit. The Imperial Pikes I'm not going to talk about. You want to go, or I'm not going to show game footage of. Sorry, I misspoke. For the Imperial Pikes, you want to go bottom line, so they're really tanky. That unit you're purely using just for the advance. The advance, you can disrupt units, knock them down. They don't do a whole lot of damage. They're mainly a support unit to stop a push or to advance a push, and you're trying to knock everything down so your other units can use their DPS to kill. The Medaus are new this season, and although technically not a polearm unit, so you can't put any of the cool polearm doctrines on them, they have the same playstyle. So these are sort of a weird mix between a pike unit and a shock troop. Playstyle is going to be a little similar to the halberdier sergeants you saw earlier. I'd recommend using this 3-rank formation while defending. It's really effective. I have a sprint doctrine on mine as well, so they go a little bit faster. So the brace is incredibly good against cavalry. It's the best polearm unit you can use against cavalry right now in this meta. Just because they'll automatically defend from all sides like the halberdier sergeants. So if the cavalry charges from behind, they still won't wipe this unit because of the way their defense buff works. And here, let me take it back. Or you can use them as a pushing DPS unit. There we go. It should start the next round. Maybe not. Here we go. I don't use the wedge a whole lot. I wouldn't recommend because it leaves the first few units vulnerable. So the way you want to use these in a push is you press that 2 button. You'll see some damage there. You use the 3 button. And then by the time that's done, your 2 is back up, so you can cycle back to that again. So again, the combo when pushing is 2, 3, 2 if you're in a brawl. and that'll pretty much wipe anything you come across. I think we've covered that a little bit, so then we can talk about the veterancy line and the doctrines you want to put on it. So obviously you want the two doctrines that you get, the one from the seasonal challenges and the one you get from the quest, because they're really good. Then I would recommend putting piercing defense and piercing damage on it, and a sprint doctrine if you have it, just so they're a little bit more mobile. You can swap out the sprint for, you know, armor pen or whatever you have on. That would be pretty good. Breakthrough would be pretty good on these units as well. I didn't have one though. The veterancy line you want to go is definitely bottom. I've tested both lines. The problem with top is, yes, it does boost your damage and your DPS, but it's really unnecessary. So you want to try and boost the defenses because they are pretty squishy without the bottom line nodes. And there isn't really a good hybrid build you can go with these guys, so I wouldn't try and mix half and half. I would just go purely bottom to get the defensive bonus, and then pick up the 3 nodes in top. So again, the placement of pikes and polearms is going to be behind your frontliners, so the shields will be in front, or if you're trying to push, try and stay behind the shock troops. And the shields, as they're advancing, try and brace through. You won't see a whole lot of blue polearm units in T-Wars. I would always recommend bringing a purple, and the main purple polearms you're going to see are the Fortebraccios and the Imperial Pikes. You're not going to use a whole lot of Halberdier Sergeants just because they're really outshined in the meta right now. And then, of course, Medaus are extremely good, and I see them being good for a while just because of the way they deal with cavalry, which is really what you're trying to do in territory wars, which is the competitive play, is stop the cavalry, and the Medaus do a fantastic job of that. If you're looking for a good siege troop that you don't want to commit a whole lot of leadership to, the Land Sharks, you can complete in Season 6 challenges. If you just want something quick and easy that you can unlock in the unit tree, that'll be your Rat and Pikemen or your Pike Militia, and we can go over the veterancy line. So it's bottom for Rat and Pikemen. The doctrines you can get are Charge. I'd recommend putting a charge on really any polearm unit. I would prioritize your high tier ones, so you definitely want to put it on your imp pikes and your forts first. The cool thing about, well, actually here we can show some imp pike gameplay. We have time. So again, the imp pikes are going to be the first unit you're rushing when you start Conqueror's Blade, just because they're quick and easy. They've always been meta throughout the seasons, and they are one of the quintessential T-War units, whether you're trying to stop cavalry or push and advance. Go bottom line with them, so you're really tanky. Top line isn't bad for damage, but if you're trying to play competitively in territory wars, I recommend using bot just because you'll get more advances off. So in most cases, I'll do the advance and pull out my imp pikes in those territory wars, and I'll still have, 20 left. So the advance here, you just press the 2 button, and as you can see, they're knocking everything down. They do a little bit of damage, and they'll kill these guys just because they're low tier troops. But you're not really going to kill a whole lot of high tier troops with it. You're mainly knocking them down and disabling the units so your team can finish up. I'd recommend bracing in the F1 formation against cavalry because of the way they're dispersed. They're not going to get immediately killed by the cav, but the brace isn't as effective as the Fortebraccios and the Medaus. You're really just using these units for the advance. A couple mechanics to keep in mind is, well, actually here, I'll wait till the advance comes up. So if you have a charge, you can charge in, immediately advance, and if you have a sprint doctrine or the lawn sword, I forget what the Knightly Vows, I think it's called, to increase movement speed. As you can see, the increase of movement speed works while they're advancing, which is pretty cool if you're trying to go a little bit further with it. The doctrines I would recommend for any polearm units are going to be piercing defense across the board because ranged is their biggest issue. And then assorted damage doctrines. The charge and sprint is obviously really good on Imperial pikes. It's pretty good on forts too. If you don't have those, you can do breakthrough. Some of the damage, epic damage doctrines you'll see against cav and just in general. I wouldn't recommend doing a whole lot of armor pen on the Fortebraccios just because it's so high. Armor pen isn't bad on Imperial pikes, but I think you'd rather have the damage on them because the pen is okay enough to get away with it, and you're really trying to boost their damage because they don't do a lot. They're just tanks and disables. Again, this is really a support unit. Well, I hope this helped you guys on how polearm units work, some of the different traits and what you should be trying to do with them. This is just a base overview of these units. Again, I would talk to some veteran players in your house or look up other informational videos so you can see actual gameplay, and you'll see some really good spots to put them in. Again, with forts and pikes in general, you want to place them behind a shield wall or around a corner where they can't be hit by ranged.